Joining us now in Washington is journalist Steve Chaggaris. He's been covering U.S. politics for 2 decades. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. This pandemic has been heavily politicized. Do you think that's adversely affecting the president?
Well, what I think is really adversely affecting him is people's judgment of how he's handling this crisis. And at the beginning, people gave him the benefit of the doubt, and polling showed that they approved of his handling of the crisis, and that has steadily gone down as the months have gone on. And now people are saying that they would trust Joe Biden to handle this more than Donald Trump. And I think that's the biggest issue. And the longer this pandemic continues, the more that's going to hurt the president's standing.
We were showing some B-roll there. The one time the president did wear a face mask in public, he's managed to also make that a wedge issue somehow. The face mask has become politicized.
Yeah, well, you know, some people have said this is an issue about freedom, personal liberty, and a lot of those people who are saying that are people who support the president. So he's really sort of echoing the sentiment of people who support him. The problem with that is that it's a minority of people in this country at this point. We've seen poll after poll showing that a majority of Americans say that we should be wearing masks throughout this crisis. And you know, for the president, in an election year, in a year where he's trying to be reelected, to be siding with people who are in the minority on an issue where it's very clear what the science is on this, it just doesn't seem to be something that is giving people a lot of confidence in how he's handling. It's just another reason why people, I think, have lost confidence in how the president is handling this crisis.
You mentioned this is an election year. Some have argued that the November vote will be won or lost in just really a handful of states. So how are those states faring against COVID-19, and how might that impact the vote?
Well, what's interesting, I think, in recent weeks, we've seen states like Florida, states like Arizona, places where we were already looking at those states as battleground states for the presidential race. And we've seen cases skyrocket in those places. And then you add in places like Texas and Georgia and other places like that, North Carolina, places where you know, the president should be running pretty strongly. Now, we don't know if there's a direct correlation between the president's polling numbers in those places and COVID, but I think it's pretty safe to make the jump that if nationally people have lost faith in how the president is handling this issue, well, in places like Arizona and Florida where the numbers have skyrocketed, that is going to be, it could very well be a problem for him if this continues at the rate it's continuing this summer.
And I imagine in places like Florida, with its governor effectively endorsed by Trump when he was running for that position, a lot of people, would they tie what the governor is doing to the president himself?
Perhaps, but the biggest issue is not the governor of Florida, because he's not running for election or re-election this year, but it's Senate races in some of these places. For instance, Arizona has a Senate race, and if the Republican is tied to the president, that's not going to help her case running for re-election there. And so there are Republicans around the country, especially Senate Republicans, who are potentially in danger of losing the majority in the Senate, who are concerned about the president and what people think about the president at this point, especially in those places where there are Senate Republicans who could be in trouble.
Steve, paint us a portrait of what an American election day amid a pandemic might look like and what problems that might create.
Yeah, it's a good question. Nobody knows. We haven't seen anything like this in modern political history. The sense right now is it's going to be chaotic. You have state after state that is basically changing their rules to try to allow more people to vote absentee or by mail. And in theory, that's a great idea. You're allowing people to stay home, cast their vote, they're not spreading the virus. The problem is the count and the counting of these votes. And it's not a smooth process in some places. We've seen some primaries this year, New York especially, in which it has been very problematic in terms of the way the votes have been counted. In fact, New York had its primary 3 weeks ago, and they still haven't finished counting all of the mail-in ballots. And so imagine that on a grander scale, more votes, all the states voting on election day. And I think if it's as chaotic as it has been through the primaries, it could be let's just put it this way. I think Americans could be raising a lot of questions about the integrity of the election, and I think you're inviting people who might be losing in these elections to raise serious questions about the integrity of the vote.
A little less than 3.5 months to go. Steve Chaggaris, thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks, Roee.